And I did it for like 10 minutes. After about 10 minutes, I'm not making this up, it started doing it on its own. I was like, oh, it was like starting to flow. I was like, oh, this is it. Oh my God, I'm finally doing it. In my brain, I was thinking this. And so I just kept going and I was getting proud. I was like, yeah, it was like I was drunk in the spirit, if you will. Pulled over on the side of the road and I called the associate youth pastor who tried to tell him, I can't drive. I need somebody to come get me. And I'm trying to speak English and I can't speak English. This thing completely overtook my body. It's creepy as hell because I'm telling you right now, knowing what I know now, that was not the Holy Spirit. Welcome to TaNaCh Talk. I am your host, William Hall, broadcasting live out of Houston, Texas, USA, with another episode of TNT, the Twisted New Testament with Rabbi Stuart. The man Federow from the Big H, Houston, Texas, who just wrote a new book, and it will be out soon, called
It's called The Real Reasons Why Jews Don't Believe in Jesus.
Nice.
About 120, 130 pages long,
Nice.
Which includes a very lengthy, like 65 or 70 entry bibliography. So the book
Nice.
itself is probably maybe 100 pages. And it's no holds barred, let me put it that way. Probably be, at least in some circles, somewhat controversial. Because basically I'm talking about the same usual stuff, but I don't try to make my words nice. And it's very simple, quick, and easy. It's not meant to be a hard or difficult read. So we'll see what happens.
Okay. So how do you want to tackle this title? Why do I have to go through Jesus to get to God?
It's a very quick, simple evening tonight. You don't have to go through Jesus to get to God. Okay, we're done.
Y'all have a good night. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you for yes. and the title comes from the chat before we started the video, and the people who
Puzzled,
therefore make the suggestions for topics are members. So become a member if you got a topic you'd like us to discuss.
Yes. So, absolutely cool. Okay, good deal. That's definitely a good way of looking at it, because it reminds me of the story. It definitely reminds me of the story of King David and Absalom. Whenever Absalom was trying to become king over, Solomon. And
right.
So he went to the city gates and made himself present all the time, say, oh, hey, greeting them as if he was already the king to win their favor, and then it didn't work. But so it feels like that this whole Jesus is no different than the Absalom thing that happened in King David's time.
The whole Christian idea, which, look, I'm not one of these people who are, part of the expression, I apologize, woke. Okay.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of wokefulness out in the world today. And part of that attitude is, if you don't agree with me, God damns you to hell.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. If you don't agree with me, we're going to silence you. We're going to cancel you. Sound familiar?
Yep.
Okay. There's a book called, I'm telling you, it's getting worse. Wait a minute. Give me 2 seconds.
1,000.
Christian Supremacy. And it traces the beginnings of racism and prejudice to the Christian idea that, only one way to God. And if you don't use that way, then you're damned to hell. And if you're damned to hell, you are open season on you is okay. God already damns you. Why not? So,
yeah,
I think there's cause to believe that. So, but how many times in the Bible the mother of Samuel goes to the altar, okay, where Eli is the priest,
yeah,
and
right.
What does she do? She starts praying directly to God.
Yep.
Abraham, okay, argues with God, for God's sakes. Moses prays to God Doesn't mention any intercess and it doesn't mention anybody between him and God. Let's see. David, Psalms, all over the place. Okay. Talks to God directly. All over the Bible, there are example after example after example of people praying directly to God with no intermediary, I can't get the word, intercession.
Well, I guess you could say that Eli was the intercessor for.
No, because Eli, no, I disagree. Because Eli wasn't standing there. As a matter of fact, he comes in and thinks she's drunk.
Right. Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
So he's not, you got this woman who is pouring her heart out directly to God. And through Eli, God gives her an answer and says, you're going to get your wish.
Well, that's kind of what I mean, though. So through Eli, God gave her the answer through Eli. So he was the intercessor.
But she's praying directly to God. She doesn't have to pray to Jesus or through Jesus to get to God.
Yeah. So you're right. So she didn't ask him. She was talking directly to the Creator. Yeah, that's right. I see.
There's an absolutely wonderful article by a woman who converted to Judaism, and one of the many reasons she cites in her article about why she converted to Judaism is because Judaism doesn't require a vice president in charge of human affairs.
Yeah.
Okay, that you get to go directly to God, and you don't have anybody in your way between you and God. And by the way, what is that funny thing called one of the 10 Commandments? You will have no other gods before me. Okay.
Yeah.
What does that mean? It means even if you think they're God, you don't have them before God. You don't have them between you and God. Even if you think they're gods, you don't have them between you and me, is what God's saying.
Right.
So the whole idea of having to go through Jesus to get to God, and Christians will say, oh, but Jesus was God. How many times in the Bible do we have instances where God contrasts himself with human beings? And as we've said repeatedly, the hallmark of the pagan idolatrous faiths of the Greco-Roman world and the Mediterranean world is the confusion between God and humans. Hercules, mother human, father God.
Right.
Dionysus, mother human, father God. Perseus, mother is human, and father was God, and Perseus's mother did not become pregnant through the act of sex, so it became like a virgin birth. Sex was not involved. Just the whole idea of having to go through Jesus to get to God is a violation of the commandment, in my opinion, and has more in common with the idolatry of the Greco-Roman world than it does with anything in the Bible related to God, or certainly within Judaism. We want to have the ability to pick up the phone and call the president, but somehow we're not going to get through. God, on the other hand, isn't that lofty or distant. And we can always talk to God without having to go through, like this woman said, vice president in charge of human affairs.
Right.
Plenty of places in the Bible where people are talking directly to God.
Okay. So how does a Christian watching right now, smart guy, how do I go straight to God? What would you tell him?
Open your mouth and talk. Unless you think God is limited and cannot hear you.
Do you think that the Christian watching right now would feel like there's no way God would listen to them because they've been brainwashed saying that was the only way? So,
well, also because Christianity teaches them that they're broken, they're horrible, they're sinners.
Yeah.
They think that God can't be anywhere near a sinner, therefore putting a limitation on God's ability, which I find to be in and of itself idolatrous. Isn't the Bible where we are taught that we are made in the image of God, little lower than the angels? So even if we sin, even if we make mistakes, all of a sudden God can't talk to us?
Right.
Okay.
Well, to be honest with you, though, I mean, God doesn't talk to us now. I mean,
excuse me.
He spoke to Moses directly, but he speaks to the prophets, through visions and dreams. So,
and I think that we have spiritual antennas.
I agree. Yeah.
That go up.
We could
okay?
sense the
And
right direction to go. Yeah.
You know, and we have a soul and we have a conscience. Okay. And we also have we have a conscience. Okay. And there is a part of us. I know what this sounds like, but I can't help it. We have a part of us that even if we are totally, completely, and utterly secular, we still have a sense of what is right and what is wrong. That's God speaking to us. So when you say that God stopped talking to us, maybe we stopped listening correctly, easily. We stopped listening properly.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, I know that God doesn't assemble all the Jews together at the base of a new mountain, Second Sinai. Ooh, that'd be a great title to a book. But there's an old saying that studying the Bible is how God speaks to us. Prayer is how we speak to God. Yeah, like Christo says, God won't speak with an audible voice. I'm not sure I would say God won't do anything, but probably won't.
Yeah.
So we have to. Great movie. What was the movie? It was an Elvis Presley song. May rest in peace. It was Matthew Perry and Salma Hayek. Fools Rush In. And she is a believer in signs. And Matthew Perry's character doesn't believe in signs at all. And by the end of the movie, he's believing in signs. Let me tell you a story real quick. Okay, there's a friend of mine who's probably retired. I haven't talked to him in too long. My fault, not his. But he took a semester's leave of absence from school, and was kind of debating if he wanted to go back, finish up his degree, ordination, whatever you want to call it, and he didn't know what to do. So he comes home one day when he's getting really close to the deadline of making the decision if he's coming back to the seminary, coming back to school. And all of a sudden, he's walking with the key in his hand, and he's walking towards the door, and all of a sudden, the key is not in his hand. And he looks everywhere. And it's sidewalk, not grass. And he cannot find it anywhere. And he takes that as a sign that he's not supposed to go into his house because he didn't have the key. And therefore, for him, it was God telling him, yeah, you kind of need to go back to school. So he comes back to school. This is him telling the story, by the way. He comes back to school, and he's, back into his studies and everything. And he talks to one of the professors, and he says, what happened? And the professor says, how did you know in your heart that the message you were supposed to receive is not to go into your house, but to go to the back to the school? Okay, maybe the message was you no longer have the keys to your car, so you have to stay here and not go back. And the reason why the professor was saying this is that sometimes we're looking for a sign, but all the sign does is help us listen to our own inner voice that comes from God. That how we interpret a sign may tell us more about ourselves than it tells us about the occult, or I don't know what to call it. Okay. The signs are around us, but it's up to us to interpret them. There's an old, very old thing, not sure what to call it. Real, unreal, superstitious, divine voice. And that is, take a Bible, okay, and just open it up at random to a page and read the first thing that grabs you, and that's got to be a message. Well, again, there's a great, wait a minute, this is too important not to include, okay? What's his name? Hine. Thank you. Okay? And listen to this poem, okay? Piet Hein. Whenever you're called on to make up your mind and you're hampered by not having any, The best way to solve the dilemma you'll find is simply by spinning a penny. No, not so that chance shall decide the affair while you're passively standing there moping, but the moment the penny is up in the air, you suddenly know what you're hoping. In other words, flipping the penny, and in the instant that it's up there and you think, ooh, I hope it lands this way, tells you what you really want. So we need sometimes the stimulus, the act that will make us figure out what we really, really want, like losing your keys. I love that. Whenever you're called on to make up your mind and you're hampered by not having any, the best way to solve the dilemma you'll find is simply by spinning a penny. No, not so that chance shall decide the affair while you're passively standing there moping, but the moment the penny is up in the air, you suddenly know what you're hoping. Piet Hein, and he used to have a name for his poems, short, quick, poignant. I think he called them groks. I think he was from Scandinavia somewhere, but at any rate, that's the same kind of thing. So these signs help us figure out, and if you want to say this is God helping us figure it out, why not? Who's to say it isn't?
So I guess my advice for Lisa, was it Lisa? I think it was Lisa.
Yes.
Just like a newborn, when they get old enough to start understanding speech patterns, the way they learn the language is they think they heard something and they follow through with the response. And if they got it right, there's a positive outcome. Get it wrong, a negative outcome. And so it's not something you just flip a switch and all of a sudden hear God. It's like a lifetime of practicing, going with gut feelings and going with influences. But one thing I can say with a surety is that if a person feels like that they can't hear from God at all, it's very possible that they're not. There's too many other. You ever try to listen? You ever try to think of the name of a song that you were trying to come up with, but the TV's on or the radio's on, and there's too much noise, distraction, and you can't focus on that. And so people's lives get distraction by movies and sports and day-to-day activities, and they never study, they never pray, whatever the case may be. So they're fully distracted, like at all times, and they wonder why they can't hear God.
See, that's what I mean about the antenna.
Yeah, right.
We have an internal antenna,
right?
And maybe we have to fine tune the dial, so that we're hearing the signal more clearly.
Yeah.
Okay, but that antenna. I mean, this is really beating the analogy to death, but maybe the antenna is more like a muscle, and you have to strengthen the muscle. You have to practice the muscle. You have to put yourself in positions where you are more likely to think about the situation.
Yeah.
See, another thing that I think, I'm not saying this is true for Lisa or for anybody else talking to us tonight, but Christianity has this built-in system of pray on it.
Right.
If you pray on it, and not, God is capable of doing anything God wants to do. The question is would God do something like that? If it's a muscle, you have to put yourself in positions and you have to start doing things to exercise that antenna to strengthen it. And maybe that's the fine-tuning the dial.
Yeah.
Of course, that shows you how old I am. Instead of simply pushing a button,
right?
It's a dial. But
I can say that people who are struggling to hear God will cripple themselves more in not being able to hear from God, because they'll get this gut feeling and then they'll go with the premise like, man, I know for a fact that was God, and then they go do it.
There we go again.
And then something negative happens or it doesn't work out. And they're like, but I know that was God. I know that was God. But the thing about it is you don't know that it was God until the outcome is there. That's how you will judge. And sometimes the outcome may be delayed. Sometimes it may take 3 or 4 or 5 movements, like playing chess, to complete one thought that you're going through. But the thing about it is don't just automatically assume that you heard from God. when you
And
hear, when you think you're
don't
getting a
assume
gut
the-
feeling, the first thing you should do is compare it to TaNaCh and make sure it doesn't violate any concepts of TaNaCh. And if it
Right.
doesn't, then you can say, maybe that was God. Maybe I'll move forward with it, go forward with it and see what happens. But this is going to take, it could take it could take years for you to get good at hearing his voice, you know, but it's no different than years for a kid being able to learn the English language because, you know, being in daycare with other people instead of spending time with their parents, you know, however that works out. So distractions, you know, that's kind of how that works. So
Yeah, well, I got to tell you, distractions are really a pain. Squirrel! Oh,
look, a distraction.
yeah.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
you know, but there are times in our lives. Here's the rabbinic analogy, and I must tell you I love this.
Okay.
Okay. When we're very, very young, first learning to walk, okay, we feel our parents' hands holding us up as we walk forward. As time goes by, okay, they're not holding our bodies, they're holding our hands, and we are walking forward, but we feel the presence of our parent.
Right.
Okay. A little while later, okay, we may not touch our parents as we are learning to walk, but we walk without them, and behind us, without our knowing, they're there for us to catch them when they fall. When we fall, they're there to catch us. Okay. Further along, what happens is that now they're in front of us, okay, holding their hands out and saying, walk to me, come here. Okay. And then you walk towards them. And the midrash, the rabbinic use of that as an analogy is that sometimes we feel God's very close, very definite, immediate presence. Okay. Sometimes God is helping us to walk through something. Okay. Sometimes God is very close and we can feel that presence of God. But sometimes God is in front of us, asking us to walk to God.
Yep. Is certainly group participation. That's for sure. Well, we can just keep answering questions. We've only been going for about 30 minutes, 25 minutes. So
With that, right. And we had a couple of things that came up, by the way.
Look, it's 8:16 p.m. One, or it's an orange circle with the letter J in it.
I would like to know about the constitution of the temple and how Christianity will understand. Well, the constitution of the temple is called the Bible. Okay, the Bible was like the U.S. Constitution. Okay, and the rabbinic interpretation of the Constitution is like the courts. Okay, discussing the laws created by Congress to determine if they're in consonance with what the Bible says, with what the Torah says. Okay, so Constitution is the Bible. The rabbinic houses are not house. That's not the right word. Are the creators of the laws, and then the rabbinic discussions, like the Talmud, become the congressional record where the debates and arguments are recorded on how to apply the laws to real life. So, for example, you know, it says, write them on the doorposts of your house and upon your gates. What's them? How do we know what them is? Because it's not clear. So rabbinic interpretation says, here's what we think it means. This is what we're going to do. And then, you know, the rabbis debate it and argue about it and come up with what they think is correct by vote. And majority wins. Sound familiar? And that, you know, is how we do it. But there are plenty of verses in the Bible that are unclear, or new circumstances, new experiences, new discoveries mean that we have to apply what we have in the Bible to the new situation or experience or invention or whatever. Not quite sure that's what you're asking. The constitution of the temple.
Yeah.
You may have meant, what's the temple made out of? What is the constitution of the temple? What is the temple made out of? Stone? So I'm not quite sure what you mean by your question, the constitution of the temple.
Now, I think you had it right. I think he's wondering how is it that the temple is supposed to really function according to Torah, and how can Christianity understand?
Well, this is in the Talmud. I mean, the Talmud
Yeah.
spent a lot of time talking about how
Yeah.
things worked in the temple. So again, I don't know exactly what he's asking.
That's okay.
See, yeah, but the Mishnah, Christo, Torah is the Constitution, Declaration of Independence, and the Mishnah are the amendments and explanations. Not really. The Mishnah is the application without really much discussion. Mishnah doesn't have a whole lot of discussion about how they came to the conclusions they came to.
Wow.
Okay, the Gemara is more of the discussion, explanations of how they discussed and argued and debated and everything else. But yes, the basic idea is the same. All right.
So Lisa asks, why do so many Christians claim to be prophets? That is beautiful. I love that question. I was subject to a handful of those throughout my Christian career as a Christian and as a teacher. And it's a lot of smoke and mirrors.
Yeah, I would say
one thing that I find very interesting is, and I've known this even when I was a Christian. It's like, we had a church that I went to. It was like 10, 15,000 members. And somebody would put in a prayer request at the church, right? And then everybody in the church would know about the prayers because they would get broadcast to everybody. And out of 10,000 people, somebody there is going to be able to fill that, answer their need for them, right? And so really, God wasn't answering their prayers; the people were, But they were saying, "Well, this is God's blessing us. This is how we know," right? I have been privy to seeing some false charlatan people who claim to be prophets who were like really using trickery to do what they were doing. And then a lot of times it's like, even a broken clock is right twice a day. So look at it that way too.
Steve Martin.
That was a good movie, The Prophet, right?
No.
Yeah, no.
No. Well, that may be a Steve Martin movie. That's not the one I'm thinking of.
Oh, okay, sorry.
But there's a Steve Martin movie where he's a tent revivalist.
Interesting.
And he had real revivalists tell them their tricks of the trade.
Wow.
Yeah, and I can look it up, but it's a great movie, by the way.
Yeah.
Funny, poignant, not so much Steve Martin humor, but he's like the main guy in the movie. But my answer to the question Lisa asks, why do so many Christians claim to be prophets? My answer is 100% pure, unmitigated ego.
That's true.
Okay, that they think they've got the word of God, that they've had the Holy Spirit, tell them.
Right.
It's like speaking in tongues or the gifts of the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you're just not cool if you can't speak in tongues.
Yeah.
Well, one of the tent revivalists who helped Steve Martin, showing him the tricks of the trade that they could use in the movie, had an article in a book called Snapping on exactly how a person is, unbeknownst to them, slowly taught how to speak in tongues. Very interesting article.
Listen, we was the church I just told you about. They 10,000 members at the time. Now it's like they're like a mega church now in Tennessee. But while we were there, they had one of the many classes they had was learn how to speak in tongues. That was the name of the class, and they had hundreds of people joining this class. And it was very simple. That they it was like just move your lips and make noises the way you hear, even if it sounds like baby jibber jabber. Just start making that noise and just keep doing it over and over and over again. It may sound crazy, but I used that logic one time because I was like really crushed because I really felt like they were onto something. This before I found out all this was nonsense. I was really upset by this, and so one day I went to a prayer meeting with a prophet that came into town, or whatever you call it, one of their lead evangelist that's been catering to the church for years. And they had me come because I was working with the youth. I wasn't the youth pastor. I was helping the youth pastor. And so they had me to come to this meeting also. And I was sitting in there. There was like 15 people in this hotel room, and they were all speaking in tongues except for me. And I felt like, what is going on, man? Maybe I've got a devil or whatever. And so on the way, when I left there, I was so disturbed by that. I was driving home, and I was just like, I was in tears. I was crying. I was praying. I was whatever. I even pulled off the side of the road. I remember like it was yesterday. I pulled off the side of the road, and I was trying to humble myself. And so I went out, the highway is right there, and I pulled off the side of the road, and I climbed on top of my car, on top of my knees with my hands up in the air, like I was praying to Allah, in the sense of things. And I was just crying out to God. I said, why? What's wrong with me? Whatever the case may be. Got back in my car, and I remember what she said. She said, if you just start with baby jibber jabber. So I started doing that. I started forcing these weird noises out of my mouth. And I did it for like 10 minutes. After about 10 minutes, and I'm not making this up, after about 10 minutes or so, I started doing it. It started doing it on its own. Like I was like, it was like starting to flow. I was like, oh, this is it. Oh my God, I'm finally doing it. In my brain, I was thinking this. And so I just kept going, and I was getting proud. I was like, I was just going off, rattling off in tongues. And as I kept going, I remember my body started kind of getting weak, almost like not convulsing, but just kind of weak and tired. I guess I was getting exhausted. I'm not sure. And I got to where I was like, I couldn't focus on driving. It was like I was drunk in the spirit, if you will. So I pulled over, and I pulled over on the side of the road, and I called the associate youth pastor who couldn't come. And I was trying to call him on the phone and try to tell him, I can't drive. I need somebody to come get me. It was like probably 10 miles from the church. And so here I am out of the car. I'm sitting on the telephone, and I'm trying to speak English, and I can't speak English. This thing completely overtook my body. And I'm telling you, it's creepy as hell, because I'm telling you right now, knowing what I know now, that was not the Holy Spirit. There was a Kundalini thing going on or something, but that was wicked as hell. So I know that people have that thing where they do have spiritual things that happen to them. But the question they need to ask themselves is this really of God? That's the question.
If you have found this channel helpful and this has blessed you or your family members in helping bring you out of idolatry, I would love to have your support. Please consider donating to this channel directly. That would be pretty awesome. Donations can be done through PayPal, Patreon, or through snail mail. The links to all are added in the video description below. You can also click this link and it will take you straight to my website with a donate button, which leads you right through PayPal. Thank you once again for your kindness and consideration for supporting this work. Blessings for you, your family, and your home. Shalom.
But the question they need to ask themselves is this really of God? That's the question. And I'm going to tell you right now, my experience, that was not a godly thing that happened. What's that?
I said, just because it's from God doesn't mean it's the God they think they're getting it from. In other words,
right.
As you've heard me say repeatedly over the years, our God is not so petty and small that he will only answer the prayers and give revelation to those who have the right faith, pray in the right name of the right God, right religion, right beliefs.
Right.
Our God even answers the prayers of Buddhists.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Larry Beck, ego and really wanting to have control over people and money. Okay. Rhonda Raines writes, I agree with that. I have one who doesn't go to church anywhere, but she has a group that she sort of leads with them, believing she gets words from God. Woman comes to Houston, starts going from one congregation to another, looking for a place to be strongly interested in conversion to Judaism. She's here with her family, and basically everywhere she goes, she finds out that, it takes work. It's not just one day you say, I believe, and that's the end of it. And she leaves Houston and forgot where she settled, but all of a sudden started being a salesperson of crystals, New Age stuff, which put her in a position of being the teacher. Okay. It would take too much work to learn to become a teacher of Judaism. So she became a seller of New Age stuff. And that gave her the ego boost. That gave her the people calling her up for advice. It gave her all that stuff that she couldn't get that quick from full conversion to Judaism. And never forget that. And she's on Facebook, and every so often I see her doing her stuff.
Larry, I see the question that you pointed out from AB. How would the yearly sacrifice affect the individual and the community, regardless of whether it was accepted or not? So, one thing that I heard somebody say one time, I'll tell you who it was because I really love this guy. His name is David Solomon, and he's probably one of the most fascinating Jewish history teachers I've ever listened to. He's really brilliant. Anyway, one of his lectures he gave, he says, God never told you to sacrifice anything. You wanted to sacrifice. And God said, fine, if you're going to do it.
That's what I said in my book.
He said, if you're going to do it, then this is how you have to do it. So,
right.
So based on that state of the question, AB, how would the yearly sacrifices affect the individual? It affects you because it makes you feel like you accomplished the right thing. But God never asked you to do that. This is like, well, if you want to do this sort of thing, then don't do it the way the world does it. This is how you are to do it. Pour the blood out on the ground.
The commandment is not to do the sacrifice. The commandment is how to do the sacrifice and of what you do the sacrifice of. That's it.
Perfectly said. Yes.
And that's I can show you that in Leviticus chapter 4, and I forgot the verse. But the question is, how would the yearly sacrifice affect the individual? What is the lesson? What is the lesson of a sacrifice? Remember that sacrifices were only for accidental sins. So if I commit first-degree premeditated cold-blooded murder, all I have to do is give up a cow and then God forgives me? Does that even make sense? No. So it was the sacrifices, the blood sacrifices were only for accidental sins, sins not done on purpose. Okay. The whole point is, I didn't mean to do it. I feel badly for having done it. I've made amends as best I could for the people that I sinned against. And now I'm offering this wheat, cow, sheep, what am I missing? Turtle dove,
flour,
pigeon,
grain.
I said wheat.
Okay, sorry.
It doesn't. Yeah, the point is that I've offered that first as a thank you to God, but also kind of with the idea of there, but for the grace of God, go I. You know, if God were to hold us to every mistake we've made, everything we do that's bad, that's wrong, accidentally, who could stand against God's judgment with that kind of? If God were that strict and that demanding and that mean and that vengeful and that, like Christianity portrays God.
Right.
But God, being merciful, compassionate, and forgiving, says it was an accident. You didn't mean to do it. Okay. If you're going to do a sacrifice, here's how you do it and here's what you do it of. Okay. And the purpose of that is thank you, God, for not, holding me to my mistakes. Great poem. What's the poem? The Fool's Prayer. The Fool's Prayer by, can't think of his name. It's when we do something on purpose, God needs to hold us, but it's our blunders, it's our mistakes, it's our accidents that really do the bad stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. At any rate, so the person thinks there, but for the grace of God go I, and thank you for forgiving me without, taking it out on me. And I'm giving you the sacrifice as a way to say, I thank you.
Right.
Okay.
So Andrea brought up, says, so if we wanted it and then learned how, can we not do sacrifices with the third temple if the majority no longer wants them?
Well, the third temple is going to be built whether everybody wants it or not.
Right.
So, if you, Abraham Kook, first chief rabbi of the state of Israel, who died in the same year Israel came into existence. Okay. He was asked 1 billion questions as the first chief Ashkenazic rabbi of Israel. And one of those questions had to do with, well, are you going to build the temple now? Okay, don't you miss having your sacrifices? And I don't know if you know this, but Abraham Kook was a very deeply committed to vegetarianism. Okay, he was a very strict vegetarian, and I guess we would call that what do we call that now?
Vegan.
What's it called?
Vegan.
Thank you. Okay, and basically his response was, in the days of the Messiah, when the temple is rebuilt, there's only one kind of sacrifice that's going to take place after everything is, gets on track. I mean, you still have to have sacrifices to purify the area, as a dedication ceremony. I'm still, but that's not the same thing as a sin sacrifice. And he said for that, the only thing that will be is incense and wheat, incense and grain, as you put it.
Right. Gotcha.
So,
okay. So Lisa said, what happens to people genuinely out of their minds when they sacrifice? It's very, for me, it makes the best sense. Like whenever, if let's just say I offended my son, for example, sometimes just saying you're sorry is not enough. You really want him. I want to make it up to him, to prove to him, I want him to know that I went out of my way to do something special, to actively participate in restoring how he feels. Right. And so whenever we do something like give tzedakah, if we do something like a major screw up or something like that, so I want to repent. Don't offer sacrifice, but give tzedakah, right? So scrape up the money you can and go feed the poor, and that really connects you with the Creator in a deep level.
People forget that, even in the Bible, you don't have, I had it and I can't remember. There are places in the Bible where the offering is valuables. Okay. Aaron goes among the people, collects jewels, gold, silver, I can't remember exactly what, as their sacrifice.
It's basically taking things that are valuable to you,
valuable to you, and giving them up as a way to say thank you, as a way to show your appreciation for God not holding you 100% accountable for absolutely everything and anything at all you ever do, accident or not. Okay. Right. And Lisa for Truth follows up with a question: what happens to people genuinely out of their minds?
That's the one we just talked about.
Chris,
that's one I just read. But yeah, that's why I brought that up.
Okay. At any rate, Crystal's answer is they can't be held accountable. Adam and Eve did not sin in the Garden of Eden. The Bible doesn't call anything in the Garden of Eden sin. Why? Because if you don't know the difference between good and evil the time you commit the crime, what do we call that? That's the insanity plea. What is insanity? What's the insanity plea as a defense? That you didn't know the difference between good and evil at the time the crime was committed. So, and they call it the insanity plea, i.e., out of their minds.
Yeah.
And they're not held responsible. What they are is they're given mental health. They're given psychiatric care.
Right.
But they don't go to jail. They go to the hospital. And when they're done, when they're brought back to being in their minds, they go free. So therefore, it's the same in secular law. But would it make sense that God would condemn somebody who can't even understand what they're doing, can't understand the difference between good and evil at the time they commit the crime?
Yeah.
If we understand God to be righteous, to be forgiving, merciful, compassionate, we're not going to come up with a God that condemns people for doing something bad who are literally out of their minds.
So that seemed to be remember I told you about my conversation that I had last night.
Yeah, sure.
With the three amigos, three lady amigos. They weren't Spanish. There was just three ladies. And two of them were in the Christian field, and one of them was a Messianic. And of course, the Messianics always think that they know more, and typically they do. Though, to be fair, they do because Messianics usually are not born into Messianic Christianity. They're born into Christianity.
More they are, William.
I know. I only know one person in all my years who was actually born into it. Now I know they are, but a lot of them are probably still young.
More they are.
Oh yeah, right. So so the Messianics are more educated biblically than the Christians are, which is how they come up with this other way of thinking. But this lady, she was not happy with anything I said at all, because
I bet she wasn't.
and so, and I told you this earlier, but I got to tell everybody else too. It's like, cause she kept like dodging all my questions. And while her two students, I'm going to call them students, were sitting next to her, I said, I realize that it's got to be really awkward for you to, up until tonight, you've been the teacher and now you become a student. And I get that makes you feel very awkward and uncomfortable, because I was in the same boat you're in now. And I said, so the point was, we went through so many things. And when I told her the idea about Passover and Easter and how the basic understanding of it, the Passover had nothing to do with sin, she goes, "Oh, yes, it did. It absolutely had to do with sin." I mean, she argued everything, but I kept giving her answers to it. And she eventually stopped giving thoughts and stopped giving any kind of like thing. She was like, "Oh, that's just not right. No, you're wrong. You're wrong." She never told me why. And it was interesting to see those tactics replayed, because I used the same tactics when I was Messianic. I mean, and it was weird to see that. But the whole idea of Passover, not being about sin, really, and I said, look at this way too. I said, so if Jesus was the Passover lamb, then that means only the firstborn males of every household, they're the only ones who can be saved. So what about the daughters and the mothers and the sisters, right? And she got really, you can see her blood was starting to boil at this point.
Oh, I bet it was.
Oh yeah. And so,
but as they say, there are none so blind as those who refuse to see.
Wisely said.
Mary at 856, it's animal sacrifices were not the only thing sacrificed.
Right. Well, actually, Andrea brought up something on that same realm, because it said David Katz brought up Ezekiel says that sacrifices will continue in the world to come, which really is a slap in the face of Christianity, because they say Jesus was the final sacrifice, but they apparently didn't know the prophets. So thank you, David, for posting that. And Andrea said it's likely that maybe it's not animals that we sacrifice, maybe it's just grain and wheat and flour and offerings like that. Maybe so, So it's just an idea to consider.
Well, but wait a minute.
Okay.
There are requirements for certain animal sacrifices, but they are meant to purify a person, and that's more physical than spiritual, and to dedicate the place. When we're talking about for sin, okay, not so sure that's what's supposed to happen, at least as I said, according to Abraham Cook. But there are animal sacrifices. Gosh. They're just not necessarily sin sacrifices. Just because you're giving up an animal, there's I forgot already, half a dozen different reasons to do sacrifices in the temple.
Yeah. Rabbi, I forgot to mention
Thanksgiving offering, a sham, which is, I think I might be guilty of something, but I'm not sure. And then if you find out you really are guilty, then you still have to offer a sin sacrifice. Okay. But again, I don't think the commandment is to offer the sacrifice. The commandment is, if you're going to offer it, here's what you do and how you do it.
So I forgot to mention this earlier when we were talking about, I forgot what it was, the topic was, but a verse came to mind, and it was Hosea 14:2. Would you like to discuss that?
Go, absolutely.
So my thought was, I know what it was now. When I said, how David Solomon said, God said, "I don't want your sacrifices, but if you insist, this is how you do it." Right. So I think we could all agree that the prophets were there to tell us what to watch out for correction, and also warnings for the future, right? So if there was going to be a time whenever a human sacrifice or a human-like figure sacrifice was going to atone for sins, it would have been talked about in the prophets. I don't mean just the wrongful, mislearned translations of right. Isaiah 53, but I'm talking about the prophets, like Hosea, for example. And Hosea did talk about sacrifices altogether, blood sacrifices, grain sacrifices. He talked about this in general, and he literally says in 14:2, he says, no longer do XYZ, but instead offer the calves of your lips, the calves, the sacrifice, instead of killing calves and donating to me, offer
In other words,
your prayers,
prayer.
your words,
Prayer
your prayers.
replaces the sacrifice.
And that's prophesied by Hosea
Right.
as a prophecy for future generations to come. Why did he mention Jesus there?
I have it, by the way. Oh, Israel, return to the eternal your God, for you have fallen by your sin. Take with you words,
yea,
and turn to the eternal. Say to the eternal, take away all sin and receive us graciously. So will we render the calves of our lips. So our words become like offerings, but they come from our lips, from our mouths. So prayer replaces the calves. Prayer replaces blood sacrifices.
In the words of the Spanish people, gracias.
De nada.
Oh, man. It's good stuff. It's scary. Very scary. Because every place you could possibly imagine that talks about future things to come, where they could have put something about Jesus, they don't exist.
Funny how that works.
Yeah. AB says, if I offer an animal sacrifice, I will need to see the Messiah's ID card, not just a building erected at the temple.
By the Temple Institute.
Okay, that reminded me of a funny dad joke. So my son's name is David. He recently lost his ID. So now we call him Dav. David Katz might like that.
Wait, you now call him what?
Dav. He lost his ID, D-A-V-I-D. Now it's just D-A-V.
Took me a couple of minutes, but I got that. No ID, he's D-A-V-I-D. I got it very clever.
No idea. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's funny. David Katz, I get it. No ID, I got that. That's funny.
Right. You'll know the Messiah if he's really the Messiah.
By the way, Lisa for Truth, you never apologize for asking questions. That's what this channel is for.
That's the whole, and there's nothing more that I love than answering questions about the Bible, God, and Judaism, and the Jewish community, and all that.
That's funny.
Yeah.
So real quick shout out to Wally Cleaver. So Wally Cleaver has been an admin, a YouTube moderator for a long time. Andrea is like my chief admin. She's been here from the beginning, I think. But Wally doesn't have Facebook. He doesn't connect with. This is the only place I see him here. So we have groups where me and Andrea and Larry Beck, and Crystal Cheney, we chat from time to time in Facebook, but we never get to chat with Wally. So Wally, you need to get a Facebook account, even if it's just so you can join the chat with us, so we can kind of include you in everything. So, by the way, if you're watching, if you see a name that's got a wrench by it, that means they're an admin. Don't tick them off because they can block you. Yes, very good. And they do a really fantastic job. Honestly, I got to say, I love the new setup with with members only chat. That saves so many distractions. It really does.
And the thing I'd like to say again about that is that some of our best ideas of what to talk about comes from you, the listeners, the people who are watching, and we might be looking for ideas of what to talk about on the chat that precedes, turning on the show.
Yeah. In fact, what we're probably going to use, at least for this show anyway, we're probably going to use the pre-chat for each of our shows here, and we might hook up 30 minutes before the show. Just know that the show starting time is going to be around 8 o'clock. It might be 8:05. It won't be earlier than 8. It'll always be after 8 p.m. So if you're watching right now and you tune in and it's like 7:45, and you're wondering why there's dead air and we're just sitting there doing nothing, it's because the show hasn't started yet. The show will start like right around 8 or after. So we'll use the pre-show chat to determine what the topic's going to be for the night. And I think that's a really great idea, because now we don't have to like try to message everybody and see if they respond. We get the live interactions. It's really good.
By the way, David Katz has a really good question.
What's a wrench?
Isn't that the name in the Middle Ages for a female?
A wrench?
Yeah.
No, that's winch.
Hi, David. When's lunch?
Alex WW Howard. Oh, we got a question here. Why don't Christians recognize crucifixion is done through wrist? Why? It just scrolled on me. Hang on. David says hi back, by the way. Is done through the wrist. So why to mention palms? Okay, so
Right. So
Alex, so I would say that's one of those topics that really don't even matter.
yeah,
I
but
mean,
there's a reason for it.
Okay, definitely take and address that for him, please, because I would like to hear
The
this
answer
also.
is because early Christian artwork had the nail through here, and artwork. Why does Christianity rely so heavily on iconography, on icons? Because they were illiterate, because they didn't read.
Oh,
Because for hundreds of years, don't ask me how long, until the printing press where anybody could take a look at the book. Okay.
interesting.
The people who translated the Bible to make it accessible to the people were killed. Okay. So why did they have pictures? Why did they have statues? Because they were illiterate, because they couldn't read for themselves. So the picture would tell the story that they wanted people to know. And when they did their Christian artwork, they did it through the palm. But
Right.
this is skin. The weight of their bodies pulling it down, would. So
Yeah.
it had to be through here.
Right. Wow.
Except that they didn't know that until somewhat recent archaeology.
Wow.
So it was really you blame the artists because they didn't know any better.
Interesting.
Right.
Okay. So.
And Alex, one more thing is I don't know Greek at all. It's all Greek to me. Obvious joke. Okay. But I don't know what the word is in the Greek and if it actually says palms where Jesus was crucified. I kind of think that's purely from artwork and not really anything specifically stated in the New Testament. I think it just says they crucified him. I don't think it says they describe exactly where anything went or how it would, how it was done.
Right.
So I blame the artists for that.
Okay. So there is a good question that just popped up. So, the whole idea, Rabbi, don't read chat. Rabbi.
What?
Stop reading chat.
I'm not reading chat.
Okay, listen, liar. So the question is, the whole thing in the Midrash where it talks about the ribbon turning red or turning white.
Sure, yes.
Okay,
yes.
so this is the context of the question. Could you clarify the Yom Kippur sacrifice or offering, which was previously referred to as the yearly sacrifice? What impact did it have? Stop scrolling. What impact did it have, and if it was accepted or not accepted? So Christianity says, or even Messianics more specifically, say that that was proof that the Jesus was the final sacrifice because their offerings in the temple was not not accepted. So do me a favor, start from ground zero because a lot of Christians watching right now don't know what that's even about. So start from ground zero and explain that.
All right. The true ground zero is that the Christian New Testament wasn't written for at minimum 20 years after Jesus was dead and buried. Okay, it was written by believing Christians who could write anything they want. And the Gospels, the part of the New Testament that's the Gospels, okay, was written at least 30 years after Jesus was dead and buried. And some of the Gospels are 70 years. Do you know how many generations that is? If it's 40 years, Jesus died supposedly in 33. The most Christian scholars say that the dating of Mark, which is the first gospel, not Matthew, that Mark, the first gospel, was written in the middle 60s, around the time of the rebellion of the Jewish community in 66.
Which means Paul's writings came before everyone.
Right, and that's what I was saying. The New Testament at minimum is 20 years later, which would be the writings of Paul, around the middle of the 50s. Okay, the book of Mark is 60s, the book of Matthew is 70s, the book of Luke is 80s, and the book of John is like the 90s, hundreds. I mean 100, not hundreds, but the year 100. Okay, so we're talking at least the gospel is 40 years after the death of Jesus. That is at least 2 and maybe 3 generations later, depending on how you want to count it,
Right.
the generation. So first understand, they had no idea what happened. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, which really weren't the real authors. It wasn't Mark, it wasn't Matthew, it wasn't Luke, it wasn't John. Luke and John both admit at the beginning of John and the end of, the beginning of Luke, the end of John, they say everything we're telling you is from people we trust, but they themselves were not eyewitnesses. So we don't know what happened with Jesus. We don't know what was said. We don't know what actually occurred, except what we're told through the eyes of believing Christians who wrote the New Testament.
Yeah, right.
That's the first place to start. So there is actually a story in it's in the Talmud, and you're going to ask me, section I can't remember, that talks about the corruption of the temple community. Remember, who ran the temple? There were 4 groups.
It was political, right? Mainly.
Oh boy, was it political.
Yeah.
The Pharisees that turned into rabbinic Judaism. It's the only one to survive of all these groups that existed at the time of Jesus, which means God chose the Judaism to survive was rabbinic Judaism,
right?
Because nobody else was around.
Footnote.
If you believe God is responsible, then God chose Pharisaic Judaism to become the Judaism from then on.
So Rabbi Singer had pointed out one thing, but don't continue yet, that the term Pharisee and rabbi are pretty well interchangeable. Now, not saying the rabbis of Jesus' time where he was criticizing what he would call the wicked ones, but the actual rabbis of the day were Pharisees. They were educators in law. So,
and yes, and the term rabbi, even though at a later point it is used to refer to people that came before the destruction of the Second Temple, but the term rabbi as a title didn't exist until after the destruction of the Second Temple in the year 70, which is how Christian scholars date Luke and John, the only places where the word rabbi is found, if I remember correctly.
And there is an acronym associated. Maybe it wasn't original. Maybe it was. Just like Yisrael, there's an acronym with that too. So the acronym for that would be Rosh B'nai Yisrael, the heads of the children of Israel. Whether it was original and it just happened that way, we don't know. Or maybe you do know. I don't. I don't really care. I think it's kind of cool though.
Most of the time, whatever you said, acronym comes after the invention of the word.
Okay, so I have a question for you then. So I think it's really cool though that Yisrael, the Hebrew word for Israel, just so happens to have the letters of the patriarchs and the matriarchs with no added letters. That's pretty clever.
Say that last part again.
So the acronym for Yisrael is the patriarchs and the matriarchs in all the letters. So conveniently, so pretty cool, huh?
Right. All right.
Yeah.
All right. So the point is that the Talmudic passage, I can't remember where, speaks about the absolute corruption of the group that controlled the temple. So you had the Pharisees, you had the Sadducees. The Sadducees were the group that controlled the temple. They were made the people who controlled the temple by Rome. Rome would give the high priesthood to the highest bidder. The one who gave the most money to Rome would be given the title of high priest, even if they weren't a Kohen, even if they weren't a priest. If they paid enough money to the Roman Empire, they would be made the high priest, even if they weren't part of the descendants of Aaron, the brother of Moses. Okay, so the Talmud talks about the absolute corruption of the temple, and for that reason, okay, one of the miracles dried up, and that was the red thread put on the goat at Yom Kippur would turn white to show that the sins were forgiven. Okay.
Is there a year associated
To
with
me,
that?
that sounds more like magic than it sounds like God, but
Agreed.
whatever.
Yeah.
Okay. And that was a reflection of the corruption of the Pharisees. Sorry, why do I do that? That was an indication of the corruption of the Sadducees, the people who were running the temple, and how corrupt they became.
Right.
Christianity, okay, later, not earlier, knows about that rabbinic passage, and they're not going to say it's because of the corruption of the Sadducees. They're going to say, "See, no need for a sacrifice anymore." The problem is that Jesus died in 30, 33, whatever, okay? The sacrifices still kept going till the year 70, even though they became less efficacious because of the corruption of the Sadducees.
Bingo. Now,
Okay.
before we go further, let's where's
thing.
the verse? There's a verse in the New Testament that proves that. So let's not forget to add that.
Which is what?
Where Paul
My
said,
mind
"Go."
went blank.
Paul said, "Go and offer sacrifices according to the law of Moses, based on
Right,
something."
right. Why would he say that?
Right.
If he didn't. Okay. And by the way, in maybe we should have this in the morning when I'm working. Tell me the Ezekiel, I think it's where it talks about the prince is going to offer sin sacrifice. A reference to the Messiah is going to be offering a sin sacrifice. Okay, it's really more of a purification, but either way, okay.
That is going to be Ezekiel 45:22.
Thank you. Okay, some of the sacrifices are still going to take place. So there is forgiveness by God. The Jews eventually get forgiven and get to go back to the land promised to them by God, originally to Abraham, then Isaac, then Jacob. The what's it called? Not reestablishment. I can't think of what it's called, where God renews the covenant, the same covenant God made with Abraham, renewed with Isaac, renewed with Jacob, renewed through Moses, and with the Jewish people. So the whole thing about sacrifices cease to exist was only true for a small time.
Right.
Yeah. I hope that answered his question.
Right.
Okay. Lisa for Truth talks about the blood and water that comes from the side after he was hit after Jesus was on the cross, was hit with the spear.
That's New Testament stuff, though. That's not TaNaCh.
That's true, but it's New Testament. And she asks, wouldn't the water have come from his lungs? Well, how do you know it's not the...
Oh, that was something that happened last night, too. So remember I told you the Messianic girl? She kept quoting the New Testament to prove the New Testament. I said, you can't do that. You can't prove... You've got to start from the origin. And that didn't work. So that's kind of happening now, I think. So
I had a missionary tell me that Ezekiel 45 verse 22 is not about the Messiah, the prince. It's about some other prince that is given the title prince by Jesus. Oh boy. No, they'll come up with anything. The ability of the human mind to twist and spin and interpret out of existence anything that comes up, any problem that they are faced with, the ability of the human mind to do that is just amazing.
The most amazing thing I've found in the years that I've been studying this stuff is, and that to this day still puzzles me more than anything ever, is the Hebrew Scriptures. It is a Jewish document. I'm gonna say an it, meaning TaNaCh.
Absolutely.
Right? And Christians think, who are not native Hebrew speakers, think that they understand it better, not only just the language, but also the culture. They don't have the cultural raising. They don't have the language at all. And they still think to this day, they understand it better than the people who actually were given to. I think that is the most ridiculous thing ever. And
Yeah.
It's yeah, it's
Yeah.
just bad. So, Lisa, for truth, you said according to the rules, wouldn't that nullify all sacrifices? You'll have to tell me what the context of that statement was. I looked back, I couldn't find your. I couldn't
Wait,
find
what?
why you said that. So, just comment again. Tell me what you're talking about.
According to the rules, wouldn't that nullify all sacrifices? I don't know what that's referring to either, but
Yeah.
I have a memory like a sieve. Everything drifts through.
Look, a distraction. Okay, so tomorrow, Greg and I will be recording at some point. So I think it's going to be around. I think it's going to be 2 p.m. my time, maybe between 1 and 3 p.m. Central.
This is Greg.
Yeah, Slow Rad McBride. Oh, and oh my gosh. So somebody he's been communicating with, everybody's been trying to come up with a nickname for me, and so we got Slow Rad McBride, and then I forgot what it was. It was something about you have to tune into Bar to find out what it was. So I officially have a nickname now, and Greg will inform that of us. So we're going to do that tomorrow. Okay, now see, Lisa just responded, according to the rules, wouldn't that nullify all sacrifices? And she says the temple corruption. Oh, she was referring to something you said.
That's why.
Okay.
That's why the thread didn't turn white, because the corruption was so bad that this is no longer going to work for you people. But when the temple comes back, okay, when the real Messiah comes, So
here's a thought. So the New Testament claims that the veil of the temple was torn, and it kind of gave you the picture that the temple was destroyed.
Same thing. That's the same
right?
thing.
But the problem is the timing is wrong, because if God was the creator of the universe and he supported Christianity, he would have probably, I would say that he would have destroyed all sacrifices when Jesus died and the temple was torn. But 30 years later, they're still offering sacrifices. Explain that. You can't. That's a huge problem. But
Yes.
they don't want to go there because it's something.
Every stone will be turned over.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. I heard a claim about that. What they said, because like the Western Wall, that was actually, the Western Wall stones are actually part of the infrastructure, not the actual building itself. But
well,
still,
that's true as far as that goes. But
Yeah.
it was still part of the Temple Mount. It was still, you know.
That's true.
Yeah. But technically, I guess you might say that's right.
Right.
Yeah, if you have two books, okay, you have a book on a book, okay?
Okay.
So the blue book represents the temple, okay, built on top of this, and the wall right here that holds the dirt upon which the temple was built, the wall holding the temple, start over. Why do I do that?
I see where you're going. That's brilliant.
The wall holding the dirt upon which the temple was constructed, the
Right.
wall holding the dirt upon which the temple was, okay,
Right.
that's the Western Wall.
Yeah.
Right there.
Right.
Could you see that? Did I do it high enough?
That's oh, you did good. Yeah, that was actually really smart. So really,
sometimes I get lucky.
no, hey, no, you're not lucky. You're really intellectual.
I'm just funny.
So the whole point that Jesus would say that no stone will be left unturned. He said no stone, not some stones, right? And he gave the idea that everything connected. The whole imagery that he was given was that everything connected to the temple would be destroyed, but he didn't. It's like saying, like we have bones. I mean, there's a concept in Judaism: you don't want to be cremated because God's going to use those bones to restore our flesh, right? So in this same scenario, I mean, the infrastructure are the bones. So why wouldn't God, if God didn't want it to be a part of it, why would he destroy everything? And he didn't, And so I think that was a false prophecy, I think. So,
well, again, the New Testament was written long after Jesus was dead and buried.
Yep.
Parts of it clearly were written only after the destruction of the Second Temple.
Right.
That's like somebody in 1980 writing a book where he's saying, I'm going to prophesy that a president of the United States is going to get shot,
I know, and that's so ridiculous. Yeah.
meaning JFK. So,
And I think that's cleverly why those writings never surfaced until later, and they wanted to claim it so that no one could prove that they weren't new writings. It's just a bunch of it's something that would not hold up in court, that's for sure. Especially with all the contradictions, you know.
right.
So
A long time ago, I had a trial lawyer book about that thick, taking everything in the New Testament as if it were fact and comparing it to jurisprudence, to the laws of a court, and it did not hold up.
right.
So,
Yep. Well.
yeah.
Well, okay, so oh wow, we've done good. We had 13 minutes of pre-show
Yep.
chit chat, and we're at an hour and 40. This is good.
I'm hoping that next week, maybe the week after, I will be able to show my newest book.
I would be delighted. I cannot wait to see it.
And the title to the new book is called The Real Reasons Why Jews Don't Believe in Jesus.
Very
The real reasons why Jews don't believe in Jesus. So, but I also have this book.
Yep. Judaism, Christianity, a contrast.
Yes,
Word.
That's my first book. Okay. And I'd also like to remind everybody about Hebrew Jumpstart. Learn how to read Hebrew in 1 hour.
874,000 views currently.
I know, it's amazing.
It's beautiful.
And
Wow.
totally William to thank for that. So if you, 9:30. Oh, wow. Okay.
Wasn't me. Tell your wife it was not me.
Yeah,
Actually, it was me, though.
It's,
Don't lie. Why? Okay, so here we go. Let me do here. I want to close this off. So if you guys haven't seen the Hebrew Jumpstart video, go to Hebrew. Just start typing in Hebrew Jumpstart in YouTube, and it'll take you to the top search. And also, if you want to get the what are the PDFs or like flashcards? Flashcards for the Hebrew Jumpstart?
There are 2 things that you can download at the HebrewJumpstart.com.
Yeah.
HebrewJumpstart.com. One of them is the handouts, which are some funny things I used to hand out about the English language, but it also includes 6 pages of that you can photocopy the 6, print out the 6 page, well, print out the whole thing. Take the 6 pages that are flashcards, go get them photocopied onto hard cardstock, and then cut them out and make your own flashcards, and you can make free flashcards. So the video is on YouTube. It's free. You can watch it 1,000,000 times. The handouts are also free that you can make into flashcards. And then also there is a workbook. So it's just reading out loud, and it allows you access to a video of me reading everything in the workbook, so you can check to see if you're pronouncing it correctly. But that's $10. But you don't have to have the workbook, but it'd be nice.
It's actually helpful though, so for sure.
I hope it's helpful.
Yeah.
So,
but so HebrewJumpstart.com is actually the official website, and you'll want to go there too to support Rabbi's work. He's Baruch Hashem doing so much to counter the effects of missionaries, and this is actually a really great start for me. This is if I had seen this video years ago, it would have been my first go-to for sure. It's because learning Hebrew, you don't have to learn Hebrew. You just have to have Hebrew resources. But for people who want to learn it, this is, I think, is probably the easiest way of approach. And I'm not telling you that just for me, although that is my opinion. I'm seeing like thousands of responses on this video. They're like, this is the best video on the internet. So for Hebrew, so share it with your friends. Research it more, watch it over and over again. So you definitely want to save it. The other thing is whatjewsbelieve.org is Rabbi's website. It functions, the website itself functions as an app for your phone. So if you use your phone and go to whatjewsbelieve.org, save it as a bookmark, you can literally click on all the hyperlinks to questions. If you're sitting with a Christian friend at lunch or somebody you're engaged in a conversation, you can click on anything that's highlighted and it'll give you the answer right there. Resources for like site locations on where you could find it in your text. It's brilliant. So you definitely want to do that. Rabbi's got a lot of wonderful resources for you to deal with. So, and I would encourage all of you to support Rabbi. Go through HebrewJumpstart.com. There's a donate button there. He's retired now without retirement, which kind of sucks, with a capital SUCKS. You guys can help him out with that. I'm just saying. Okay, guys, thank you so much. We're going to end the video session. We're not going to hang up yet. We're not going to disconnect. But we're going to wrap this up so that we can actually talk for a few more minutes after the fact. So you guys have a great night. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, turn on notifications, and don't miss anything. We are in the holiday seasons. Today's date is October 7th right now. So we're right around the holidays, October 7th, 2024. So if you're watching this video later, like next month, don't get confused on the timing. We may have some shows missing like in the next 2 or 3 weeks. If you find me on Facebook, you can find the updates easier there. And just kind of follow me there. Also, I do put notifications on YouTube, but if you haven't subscribed and turned on notifications, you won't get those. So do that as well. That being said, y'all have a great night. Shalom. Peace to you and your family and your home. So, all right, Rabbi.
And Gemar Chatima Tova, happy and a healthy new year.
Yes, very good.
Shalom, my dear friends. Hope this message finds you well. If you like the way this channel is going and the channel has been a blessing to you, please consider supporting the channel by going to the website, TaNaChTalk.com, TaNaChTalk.com. Thank you once again for your time and for supporting TaNaCh Talk. Shalom.
חשוב מכל חשוב והכרחי להיות ביחד. איפוק זו העוצמה, ויתור זו הגדולה, השאיפה